The night Daniel discovered the cheat that would change his life forever, the city was quiet in that way it only is after midnight, when even the neon lights seem tired and the roads sigh with fewer cars. He sat at his kitchen table, a single bulb casting yellow light over a mess of unopened bills. He rubbed his temples and stared at the numbers until they blurred, wondering how he had gotten here. Years of hard work, endless hours spent hustling at a business that barely broke even, and still he was behind. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. But the system seemed rigged, and he was losing. Then came the message. It wasn't the kind of thing that usually caught his attention, but that night he was desperate enough to open anything that promised a way out. It was a short email with a strange subject line: the #1 business cheat they don't want you to know. No flashy graphics, no hard sell. Just a few lines of text and a link. It felt almost too simple, which is exactly why Daniel hesitated. He had been burned before by gurus and get-rich-quick scams that emptied his wallet faster than they filled it. But something about the timing, about the stillness of the night, and the weight of his exhaustion made him click. What he found was not what he expected. The link led to a private forum post hidden behind a wall of disclaimers. It wasn't selling anything. It wasn't promising instant millions. It was just a story, someone else's story, about how they used a loophole in the way big businesses reported inventory to get products dirt cheap and resell them at full price. Daniel read the entire thing twice before it clicked. This wasn't illegal. It was just clever. Companies often wrote off overstocked or slightly mispackaged items as losses, dumping them for pennies. If you knew where to look, you could scoop them up and flip them. Daniel didn't sleep that night. By dawn, he had mapped out a plan. He found 3 suppliers who listed excess inventory for liquidation and contacted them before the sun was even up. By noon, he had convinced one of them to sell him a small batch of phone accessories at a fraction of their market price. He didn't even have a website ready, so he threw together a quick online storefront using free templates. The next day, he sold half of the batch through social media ads, making back his entire investment and more. The money wasn't huge at first, but the feeling was electric. For the first time, he felt like the game wasn't just playing him. He was playing it. Weeks turned into months. Daniel learned the rhythm of the system, the places where inventory quietly changed hands before hitting dumpsters or discount bins. He became faster, smarter, better at negotiating. He started reinvesting profits into bigger buys, turning what had been a kitchen table hustle into a warehouse operation. Soon he had employees, shipping labels stacked by the hundreds, and revenue charts that made his accountant raise an eyebrow. But Daniel never forgot that night at the table, the glow of unpaid bills mocking him. That memory became fuel. He didn't just want to survive anymore. He wanted to build something that could never be taken from him. The business cheat, as he now called it, wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was simply knowing how to see what others ignored. It was looking where no one else bothered to look. It was understanding that the world throws away more value than most people will ever pick up. 1 year after that email, Daniel stood in a rented office space with his first 3 full-time employees. He looked around at the shelves of inventory, the hum of printers spitting out shipping labels, and the tired but excited faces of the people who now depended on him. The bills were paid. The debt was gone. And for the first time in a long time, he felt rich, not just in money, but in possibility. Daniel never found out who wrote that original forum post. It disappeared months later, scrubbed from the internet as if it had never existed. But he didn't need it anymore. The cheat was no longer a secret. It was his way of life. And if anyone asked him how he got rich, he would smile and say the same thing every time. I just learned where everyone else stopped looking. Daniel sat in the dark, his apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of pipes. The pile of bills on the table looked less like paper and more like a jury ready to deliver a sentence. He rubbed the back of his neck, fighting the sting behind his eyes. He had done everything right: college degree, internships, 10 years of grinding to build a small business selling handcrafted leather goods. But his bank account was a desert, and his dreams were bleeding out slowly, one overdue payment at a time. His phone buzzed. At first, he ignored it. Nothing good ever came after midnight. But then he saw the subject line glowing faintly on the cracked screen. The #1 business cheat that will make you rich. Normally, he would have deleted it.
Spam, scam, snake oil.
But that night, desperation made him reckless. His thumb hovered, then tapped. The link opened to a stripped-down webpage. No ads. No sales pitch. Just a single post by someone named Ghost Trader. If you're reading this, you've been looking for a way out. This isn't about working harder or waiting for luck. This is about seeing what no one else sees. Companies throw away value every single day. Their loss can be your goldmine if you know where to look. It went on to explain a method so simple it almost felt illegal. Big brands routinely liquidated perfectly good products, misprinted labels, last-season packaging, overstocked items, by selling them in bulk to whoever could take them off their hands. Most people never heard about these deals because they were buried in obscure liquidation sites or back-channel supplier lists. Buy cheap, sell fast, repeat. Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. It sounded too easy. But there were no affiliate links, no coaching programs, no buy my course. Just information. At 3 a.m., heart hammering, Daniel registered for one of the liquidation sites mentioned in the post. The next morning, bleary-eyed and jittery from too much coffee, he made his first call. The man on the other end sounded skeptical at first, but when Daniel asked about Lot 47, there was a pause, then a sigh of recognition. "You're serious about this?" the man asked. "Yes," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "All right. But you better be ready to take everything. No cherry-picking." Daniel agreed before he could think too hard. When he hung up, he realized he had just spent nearly every dollar left on his credit card for a pallet of phone chargers and cases he had never even seen. When the truck arrived 3 days later, Daniel's stomach churned. The boxes looked huge, heavy, threatening. What if they were defective? What if no one bought them? What if he had just buried himself even deeper in debt? He spent all night taking photos, writing product descriptions, and throwing together an online storefront using a free template. He launched his first ad campaign at 4 a.m. and collapsed on the couch. When he woke up 3 hours later, his phone was buzzing. 10 orders, then 20, then 50. By the end of the day, he had sold through half the pallet. Daniel laughed until he couldn't breathe. The next week, he reinvested everything and bought 2 more pallets, this time laptops with slightly dented packaging. Then it was designer shoes, kitchen appliances, headphones. His apartment turned into a storage unit, boxes stacked to the ceiling. He barely slept, running on caffeine and adrenaline, packing orders until sunrise. It wasn't smooth sailing. Some batches arrived half-broken. Some customers complained. At one point, a shipment sat stuck in customs for 3 weeks and nearly bankrupted him. But Daniel kept moving, learning, taking risks no one else dared take. Within a year, he had rented a warehouse. Within 2, he had 3 employees. His revenue passed 7 figures. He remembered the first time he handed a paycheck to someone else and realized that he wasn't just saving himself anymore. He was feeding families. But he never forgot that night at the table. The bills piled like vultures, the click that changed everything. The cheat wasn't just a trick. It was a shift in perspective. The world didn't just hand him money. He had to be willing to grab it when no one else would. Sometimes Daniel would tell the story at business conferences. People always leaned forward at the part where he clicked that email, as if waiting for him to reveal some magic formula. But all he ever said was this: "The system isn't fair. But if you look closely, you'll find cracks where the money leaks out. The rich don't get richer because they work harder. They get richer because they notice the cracks. And now so do I." And then he'd smile, because he knew there were still more cracks to find. This version gives Daniel more internal conflict, more near-failure moments, and higher stakes so readers really feel the tension of his decision and the payoff of his success. Daniel didn't notice the clock until it clicked past midnight. His apartment was dim and heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional car hissing past outside. The bills on the table were spread out like an accusation.
Rent,
utilities, loan payments. The numbers didn't just look bad, they looked impossible. He had been holding it together for months with duct tape and luck, but this time he wasn't sure he could make it through. His laptop pinged. At first he thought about ignoring it, but his hand moved on its own. The subject line burned in the dark. The #1 business cheat that will make you rich.
He almost laughed. Probably spam.
Probably another pitch from some fake guru who'd never been broke a day in his life. But Daniel clicked. The page that loaded was plain white, just black text, no ads, no colors. If you are reading this, you're desperate.
Good.
Desperation is the only state where most people are willing to see the truth. Here's the truth. Businesses throw away millions of dollars every day in the form of unsold products. If you're willing to get your hands dirty, you can take what they throw away and sell it back to the world. The rules are simple. Find what they discard, buy it cheap, sell it fast. Do it before someone else does. At the bottom of the post was a list of suppliers and liquidators, names Daniel had never heard of, links buried deep in the corners of the internet. He stared at the screen for nearly an hour, his pulse thudding in his ears. It felt wrong. Not illegal, but wrong in a way that made his skin prickle. He had played by the rules his whole life and gotten nowhere. If this failed, there would be no coming back. By 3 a.m., Daniel had created an account on one of the sites and bid on his first lot, a pallet of electronics labeled customer returns. The cost was almost everything left on his credit card. When he hit confirm purchase, it felt like stepping off a cliff. 3 days later, the truck pulled up outside his building. Daniel dragged the boxes up to his apartment, his hands shaking. Some items were perfect, still sealed. Some were broken. Some were clearly used. He stayed up all night sorting, testing, cleaning. When dawn came, he had a small pile of perfect stock and a bigger pile of junk he'd need to get rid of. He photographed the good ones, posted them online, and prayed. By the end of the day, the orders came in.
1.
Then 5. Then 20. Daniel barely slept for weeks. Every cent went back into new lots, bigger ones, riskier ones. Sometimes he hit gold, a shipment of high-end headphones, a batch of smartwatches that sold out in hours. Other times he got burned. A truckload of blenders arrived shattered beyond repair. A batch of tablets came locked and unusable. Once, a pallet of laptops was lost in transit, and Daniel had to beg his credit card company not to shut him down. As the money grew, so did the temptation. Soon Daniel wasn't just buying liquidations. He was calling store managers directly, slipping them cash to tip him off when shipments were about to be written off. He hired someone to strip barcodes off boxes, so buyers couldn't trace them back. He learned which products could be refurbished just enough to look brand new. He stopped telling his friends where the money came from. He stopped answering his mother's calls. All he cared about was the next deal, the next shipment, the next rush of watching the numbers climb higher. And yet, the fear never left. Every time a new truck pulled up, Daniel's stomach twisted. One bad batch could wipe him out. One angry customer could report him. One mistake, and the entire empire he was building could turn to dust. But he couldn't stop. A year later, Daniel stood in his rented warehouse, watching forklifts carry pallets past rows of shelves stacked to the ceiling. He had employees now. He had a logistics manager, an accountant, a lawyer, who kept things just legal enough. The business was thriving, but Daniel barely recognized himself. That night, when everyone had gone home, he sat alone on a crate and opened the old email again. The forum post had been deleted long ago, but Daniel didn't need it anymore. He thought about that first pallet, about how close he had come to losing everything, and how close he still was every single day. If anyone asked him how he got rich, he never told them the whole story. "I found a crack in the system," he would say, "and I widened it until I could walk through." Then he'd smile, though sometimes it looked more like a warning. Because Daniel knew something no one else did. The cheat that made him rich could destroy him just as fast.